75 entitled Open Public Meetings Act. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided as specified in the Act. Proper notice of this meeting was posted on November 19, 2009. Said notice was also posted at the entrance of the Board of Education offices, mailed to the Nutley Sun, Star Ledger, North Jersey Herald News, and the Nutley Journal, mailed to the Nutley Township Clerk. This is an official meeting. Formal action will be taken. Please rise for the moment of silence in the front salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Francola.
Here.
Mr. Cookta.
Here.
Master Tola. Mr. Riley.
Here.
Mr. Rogers. Here. Mr. Russo.
Here.
Mr. Sauter.
Here.
Mrs. Pizzato.
Here.
Dr. Casal.
Here. Have a motion to approve minutes as listed. So moved. Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Mr. Francola.
As mentioned on the night of November, both meetings opened and closed. Is not here. Yes, I'm ready to.
Mr. Cookta.
Yes.
Mr. Riley.
Yes.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Ms. Russo.
Yes.
Mr. Sauter.
Yes.
Mr. Pizzato.
Yes.
Dr. Casal.
Yes. Any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Any, Mr. Zara? Superintendent's report?
Yes, Doctor, I'd like to start out by inviting Mr. Miello and Mr. DeCusky up to the microphone. We're very happy to see them both here. I was under the impression that you weren't going to make a job, but I'm glad you're here. We were going to honor our All-State Chorus, but one of the young ladies is ill and is not available, so we'll postpone that till December perhaps. But Mr. Maiello has some outstanding news and wonderful success with our band, so if you would please just address the board and the audience. Thank you.
What a great achievement. The Raider Marching Band has received first place trophies in local band competitions before, and while most of these were under the helm of Mr. Maiello during the past 5 years, never has the Raider Band come close to winning it all. This was a real big win for us, this championship. I want to give my sincere congratulations to Mr. Maiello, his talented students, and the band staff for this extraordinary accomplishment, winning the first place trophy in the Group 2A class of the United States Marching Band Northeast States Championship. In closing, I would like to thank Mr. Zara, Mrs. Francioso, Mr. Catchambone, and the Nutley Board of Education for your unwavering support of our music program. We could never have reached this goal without you. Thank you.
I'd just like to take a moment to say thank you to all of you. And the best way I can characterize the win last Saturday was that it was a team win. The students really performed at an unbelievably high level. The staff really did a great job preparing the show for this year. But it's just more than that. It's our parent support, and it's all the support that we get from the Board of Education and all of our administration. Really, any one little piece of that, of what I just described to all of you, if it wasn't there, we couldn't have achieved the goals that we were able to. So on behalf of all the students and staff, I'd like to thank you again for all that you do for us, and thank you very, very much.
I'm not sure everybody in here understands exactly what happened.
Okay, sure. We won the USSBA Northern States Championship. We competed against 11 groups from 5 different states along the Northeast. We went in rated, I guess, or ranked number 2, and they were able to really just play an unbelievable show. We scored a 90.825, which is the first time in a very long time that a Nutley group achieved that high of a rating. We also achieved honors of Best Music, Best Percussion, and Best Effect. I guess really out of the group twos and the group threes, we did have the highest number of the evening as well. So just to give you an idea of the scope of it, it's not even just a local festival or even a state festival. This is a regional festival that we were able to win. So it's really awesome to win a grand championship. It really is. It was a great feeling. And I think if you go to the music webpage, the nutleymusic.org, you'll see Will Bean holding probably the biggest trophy that I've ever seen in my entire life. You know, over his head, you could tell the sheer glee on their faces. So it really was a very amazing thing.
Thank you.
Congratulations again, and certainly we're going to bring we'll have to have a larger room, but we'll bring the marching band up to recognize them as a group. Thank you very, very much, and congratulations. And Mr. Stewart.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'd like to remark on that. I have to say that, I've gone to every football game, I think, for the last 20 years or so, and the band has remarkably improved as compared to what it was. As a matter of fact, it's really outstanding. And I guess it's all owed to you and your tutelage, so to speak. It is very, very good, and I make that remark every time I go to a game to see them play.
I just wanted to make a comment, because every time I drove down Franklin Avenue and I heard noise coming, music coming, I always wondered where it was coming from. It was the band working in the dark in the Oval. And it was just amazing. I would stop and I look over and then I'd see them moving around down on the field. I'm sure it was hard work, and we appreciate the work you guys do. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Yes, a few more remarks before we move on with the resolutions. On a very sad note, Michael Scarpelli, a member of the Nutley High School class of 2007, passed away suddenly on Saturday. Our condolences go out to his family, and it's just a tragedy, and we remember Michael very, very well as a student. Also, several committees met on December 12th, the Finance Committee, Policy Committee, and Facilities Committee, and I'm sure we're going to have reports from them. On the 16th was district-wide curriculum development. That is moving along very well, and we will have a curriculum report from Mr. Clicchio and Mrs. Clerico at our next public meeting. On the 17th, the full board reviewed applicants for the interim business administrator's position to replace Mr. DeVita. On the 18th, I attended the high school PTO meeting, and it was a very, very well-attended meeting, and parents raised a number of ideas that I will share with the board. And finally, on the 19th, Mr. Soo-Koo Chung, the superintendent of the Boston Korea School District, visited Radcliffe in the Spring Garden School. There are a number of student teachers from Korea who are placed in our school district through Bloomfield College, and he flew to the United States to visit and gauge their progress. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zare. Board Secretary report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we have Mr. Guy Quincy here. He's one of our auditors. He's going to present our annual audit. But before I introduce him, I just wanted to make note of a few resolutions. Board Secretary Resolution number 15, it's a grant that the district will be receiving from the Italian American Committee on Education. There's no dollar amount in there, but the amount is $29,000. And the special thanks goes to Mr. Chair Volante for his hard work in applying for it and helping the district receive the grant. And then also, resolution number 17 is a donation from the Lincoln School PTO to buy 4 smartboards valued at $13,889. And lastly, resolution number 14, this is for the approval of the prescription drug benefits for the 2010 year. And it's a reduction of 5% of the rate from in the previous year, and that should save the district around $7,000. So I just wanted to make note of that. And if there's no questions, Mr. Lucy. And also one thing in the handout, you received the synopsis from the auditor, and also there's a couple of the last 2 pages of it, some charts that we have to try to run the order for.
Thank you, Mr. DeVita. Good evening to the board and to the public. As Mike mentioned, there is a audit synopsis that I think that is part of the packet tonight. if anybody wants to have a copy to follow along. The audit we filed with the board was for the 2008-9 school year. We provided 2 documents to the board. One is a financial report. The second report had to do with our audit findings. And the first page of the synopsis, which is the balance sheet as of June 30th, the end of the fiscal year. If I could just highlight a couple key financial areas. The general fund, which is the board's main operating account, encompasses all the budgetary accounts. What is included in the document that the voters do have a right to vote on with the tax levy. 2 issues that I think are very important to emphasize. The general fund surplus, which we call fund balance, on this balance sheet actually presents a negative $70,000. It's somewhat misleading because if you remember 3 or 4 years ago, the state held back your last state aid payment, and they deferred that payment to that following fiscal year. A few months ago, because of the financial difficulties that the state encountered, they withheld a second payment. Now, by the state deferring the payment to the districts, and that is statewide, that is not just here, by deferring that payment to the following year, we cannot accrue the that you were entitled to, and as a result, we cannot present the surplus because of a technical accounting issue. From a GAAP perspective, which is generally accepted accounting principles, it's not a receivable because the state budgeted that amount in their 2009 10-year. So from a GAAP perspective, that's picked up this year. The state, when they monitor districts statewide for surplus, they use what they call budgetary basis. If you factor that $1 million that the district collected in July, the actual unreserved surplus, even though here it shows a negative $251,000, in reality it's a positive $800,000. So you are within the excess surplus calculation, but again, it's very important to understand that when you look at this balance sheet, the district is not in a deficit position as of June 30th. The second fund, just to touch on a couple items, the capital projects fund, which is the activity related to your referendums. At, again, June 30th, there is $24.9 million left of fund balance, of which $14 million has been committed by contracts. What has not been committed as of June, which I think has changed since I did attend a facility meeting, there is $10.7 million left as of June, and I'm sure that amount has been reduced by actions taken subsequent to June 30th. The synopsis also includes recommendations that we made, and we have discussed that with the board's finance committee. The first 3 items deal with financial matters, dealing with recording year-end purchase orders. The second one touches on capital asset record keeping. That one we are recommending that that system be integrated with your purchasing software. It would be very easy to maintain that in-house as opposed to working it through your actual budget system as opposed to keeping independent accounting records of that. And the third item touched on financial reporting. There's been improvements in that area. Certain balance sheet accounts we have made adjustments to, recording of accounts receivable, recording of payables, and deferred revenue. Again, it's an area that we're just looking to improve the procedures and record keeping in that area. The fourth item touched on the capital projects fund, dealing with contracts that have been approved by the board. When we tested the certification that the architect has on file, some of the awards that the board did approve were not included on the architect certification. It's very important that that certification include all actions taken by the board. A requirement of the state now also, since your last referendum encompassed numerous schools, those accounting records have to be maintained by school. We have met with your facility, the construction manager, I should say, and I've also met with the business administrator, and there's now additional information that I think the construction manager obtained from the prior construction manager, which would facilitate the allocation of some of those costs. Some of the items were based on percentages, but now we have a better breakdown as to what each school should have been allocated on some of those costs. And I think over the next month, those adjustments will be reflected in the board's capital project records. The last bullet under that deals with the budget estimates that were submitted to the state a few years ago. The approval for the bathroom renovations was not obtained. We're recommending that the budget estimates, budget reports that were submitted to the state be modified. And again, that has been discussed at a facility meeting, and that's on the agenda to carry forward to the state. There was a compliance matter dealing with school purchasing, advertisements of professionals, as well as the when the district utilizes a state vendor, where the state has actually performed the bidding process. Some of those items were not approved by board resolution. It's not a situation where we didn't see any approvals. We just saw situations where some of the vendors just were not approved by the board, as well as when the board uses ed data to do their bidding. We're recommending again that the board take the action to approve that also by resolution. And the extended day, looking to develop a invoicing or billing system, which I think the business office is trying to implement a software package for that. And the last touched on the student body activities and a compliance item just to utilize pre-numbered receipts. Any questions from the board regarding either report?
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Quincy. Thank you. Anything to add?
Just that, as Mr. Vinci said, we do have a good number that is in a surplus amount. And he did make reference to that last year we weren't going to be in a deficit, and that also applies to this year. We are meeting with the Finance Committee, and both with our surplus that we have, and also reviewing our costs, we will be okay for this year, not on the deficit. And I'd also like to thank the audit is a reflection of my work, but also of my staff, and their hard work also goes into this, so I want to thank them for their hard work also. So,
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
How are we transitioning once you go as far as finances? Is our accountant attending these meetings with you, Gary Dempsey, and Epic Construction, for example?
Yeah, with Mr. Vinci and Bill Morris, our construction manager, we have been meeting over the past month to review all of the finances for each project. And we have, before I leave, there will be a whole detailed accounting of every project, and everything will be accurate. And so when the next person comes in, they'll be able to look at that and be able to handle everything.
Gary, you're comfortable with everything that's going on as far as transitioning?
Yes. Yes. I think it's very important, obviously, to fill the slot from a continuity perspective, to maintain somebody in-house before Michael leaves.
Anything else? Any committee reports? Yes, Mr. Cook.
As was mentioned, we had a Finance Committee meeting, and Mr. Vinci was at it, presented the audit report, and besides the details I gave you, we had some other suggestions where things we can enhance, maybe some cost-saving measures or some financial issues that we're going to address during the course of this year. The other two items that we talked about at the Finance Committee meeting, and Mr. Peter mentioned it, that the current fiscal year, there are a number of impacts that have occurred since the budget was cast, but that at this point in time, we think there's little offsets, and that we expect to come in at budget, just at budget. So And then we also start talking about, discuss the process for next fiscal year budget. And we're going to meet again on December 3rd to continue that discussion.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? Yes, Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mr. President. As far as facilities and construction goes, there's quite a bit going on in the district right now. Lincoln School is quiet right now, but once we're completed with the windows at Washington School, we will begin the new windows at Lincoln Elementary School. Phase 2 masonry restoration work will commence June 2010. Roofing at the greenhouse vestibule will be performed this month. Roof replacement for the entire school will commence in June as well. As far as Ratcliffe School, we can see a big transformation there as the roof work is being completed and the window replacement work continues. That work should be complete in a week or two at that facility. And then just about done there. The Adequate School, no work was performed in October. There'll be work commencing in June as far as the Phase 2 masonry restoration work there, and the roof replacement will also begin in June of 2010. Washington School is fabulous. They've done a terrific job at that facility. The masonry restoration is top-notch. That whole project is on schedule. The roof replacement continues, and that should be done shortly. Spring Garden, which is where most of the work is being done as we speak, with the new gym. The masonry Phase 1 punch list has been completed, and Phase 2 masonry restoration work will commence June 2010, but right now you can see they're continuing with the masonry walls and trying to get that tightened up before the weather gets tough. The roofing is scheduled to commence at the addition. Site work storm system will be completed. That's going on as we speak. Paving and curbs are scheduled to commence shortly. HVAC, electric roughing work will continue. And you can see they're also working on the stair tower, which is adjacent to the gym as well. There will be work at the high school as well. The roofing contractor is scheduling this work for when Washington and Ratcliffe are 100% complete, and we'll start there. But this committee, I'd like to thank everybody on the committee. We've probably had more meetings than any other committee, and we've worked hard to bring this project back to where it needs to be, which is on time and on budget. We're right there as we speak, and Mr. Vinci is helping us close the gaps, as he discussed earlier, as far as with work that was approved or authorized to proceed without the approval of the state, specifically the bathrooms. And we're trying to work that into the existing budget with Mr. Vinci's help, and we're positive that we'll be able to do that. If there's any questions from the board, I'll take them at this time.
Questions from the board?
No questions. I'd just like to close by thanking all our professionals who are doing an outstanding job. Epic Construction, who's a construction manager, who provided us with this detail that we have here before us tonight, is just doing an exemplary job, and we thank them. Thank you.
Okay, and then Mr. Riley, I'd like to thank you for your leadership on that committee, because we are day and night where you started off on that committee and where we are today. So
Thank you.
I think it's a reflection of your ability to hold everybody's feet to the fire and move things along. Appreciate it. Any other committee reports? Okay, seeing none, I see our student rep is here tonight. I know you'd like to stay to the end of the meeting to give your report, but I would prefer you speak with us now, and will not break our hearts if you need to leave early.
Thank you. Thank you. I am the student council president at Nutley High School, and student council-wise, we've been very busy for the past 2 months. In October, we decorated the senior courtyard for Halloween with hay bales and corn stalks, and that was provided to us from Center Ridge Nursery, and we are already planning on decorating it for Christmas, so that'll be starting soon. Also in October, one of the students at school, she's the state officer, the vice president, and we attended the NJASC Fall Business Meeting at the College of New Jersey, and Deanna Cafone, ran a workshop on running for state office, and she's very involved in everything for state office and student council in our school. Also in October, the senior cruise took place. That was around the middle of October. A lot of seniors attended it this year. It was a very good turnout, and unfortunately, because of scheduling conflicts, the student council volleyball tournament got canceled that day, but we'll reschedule that soon. And over the past month, we've been planning the Powder Puff football game, and that took place last weekend on Saturday, and that was very successful. But unfortunately, the juniors won. But a lot of people came, and we raised a lot of money through the snack stand and through the tickets that you had to buy to attend it, and a lot of juniors and seniors played as well, so it was a success. Also, with Powder Puff, we sold shirts. Actually, we sold game shirts that for $10 that raised money for student council. These were the senior shirts, and that on the back. I got my last name's Urso, so. And we sold novelty shirts. Oh wait. Novelty shirts for anyone. You didn't have to be junior or senior. Anyone could buy them, and they just said that they were $10 as well. No pets needed. And a lot of people bought those too. We sell them, I think, every 2 years, so freshmen and sophomores can buy them too, not just juniors and seniors. And along with the Powder Puff shirts, we also just sold student council shirts, and they were $10 too. And anyone who is in student council can buy them, and they're good for it if we go to conferences for student council, where there's a lot of members that attend, so we can all look uniform and wear them. And that also raised money. We need money. Last Tuesday, on November 17th, we attended the Essex County Prosecutor's Office Conference at Rutgers Newark. We were invited to it, and there we attended workshops on dating violence and just violence prevention and internet safety. It was very informative, and we brought the things that we learned back to our school. Currently, the seniors are planning the fashion show, which is going to take place on Friday, February 5th at Mayfair Farms. And tickets are still available if anyone wants to attend. Everyone is welcome. You can contact the high school to get in touch with someone who's selling the tickets if you are interested. Or I have a form here, but I only have one if anyone wants to see it. The juniors are preparing for their semi-formal, which is taking place in April, but that takes a lot of planning, so they're already preparing for that. And their theme is Italy this year, so it should be interesting. The freshmen and sophomores aren't really doing as big of things, but they're selling flowers and pies for the holidays, and you can still buy those if you want them. It's good to raise money early on in the high school too. We are also preparing for the toy drive, which is taking place on December 18th in the cafeteria at the high school at 2:45, and it would be greatly appreciated if anyone, if you're around, could bring a toy or two for the children who aren't really going to get that much this Christmas season. And there's free food and drinks also, so it's just some incentive to come. And we'll be donating them to the Family Service Bureau. And last year we collected about 240 gifts, so it was really successful. And hopefully we plan to get that many this year too. That's December 18th. And last but not least, we're preparing for the NJASC Winter Conference in January, where a lot of student council members and officers go to, and we run 2 workshops, one for decathlon, which we have in the spring, and one for fashion show, just to inform like other schools about what we're doing, and so they can maybe implement them in their school as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I assume T-shirts are still on sale? Yes?
The student council shirts are, yes.
What specifically, what do you have left that you're selling for a fundraiser?
Novelty shirts.
Novelty, the student council shirts? Are,
No,
which ones? Powder Puff King?
yeah, the ones that anyone but.
Okay.
We're still putting, and I think we're still putting it in order for the student council shirts if anyone wants to buy them, but most of the students want
If you
them.
would provide our Madeline Kukuza with a list of what you're selling, she can put that board package so that board members can know about that, and maybe we can put something like that up on the website so people know. That's
Okay.
where, and we'll probably help you out. And speaking for myself, unless you have something in double X, I can't help you.
I think we do.
Thanks for coming out. I said,
Thank you.
if you have some homework to do, I understand. You have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, and no more committee reports at this time. Anyone else? Anything? Okay, at this time we have a hearing of citizens on resolution items only. Board regulations allow 20 minutes for these communications. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. We ask you to try to stay within this requirement. Speakers may speak more than once only if everyone else has had the opportunity. All comments should be directed to the chair. Anyone on resolution items only? Okay, closing the report. Just kidding.
Mike Russo, 11 Beach Street. First one is on Schedule C, which is the, I guess, the salaries for the professional staff. I noticed that some of them have a $150 stipend. Can somebody clarify that? What that is for?
Schedule C.
The professional staff salaries. You get to the second page.
Oh, I see.
I think that's for the child study firm. I think it's part of their contract, that they have
Yes.
to get a stipend.
It's exactly what it is.
I have a couple more questions for that sentence.
Oh, no, I guess that's.
Okay, on Appendix E, which is the transfer schedule, there's a transfer of $7,000 for football reconditioning. That's Appendix E.
That's actually coming out of that line. The numbers on the right are the line where it's coming from, the numbers on the left is where it's going to. So for that one, it came, the money was reduced from the reconditioning line, and then it was put into cover salaries for the grounds for the football game.
On Appendix H, pre-approved trip list.
Yes.
Down near the bottom on December 9th, it looks like, it just says the location, it's just a trip to, from the high school to Meadowlands, and then the line underneath that just says drop-off students at school. Can somebody clear that one up for me?
I don't think I can this evening. I will certainly look into it.
I think that's for the Gifted and Talented program. So I think they go to each school. I'm not sure exactly what they do, but that's a drop them off at a review.
Is that one and the same though? Is the trip to the Meadowlands, it's the same day?
Oh, no, that's, I believe that's different. But I can double check that, but I believe it's two different items.
The other question I had is, Mr. DeVita, you mentioned on resolution item number 17, which was I guess it was a donation for the smart boards. I didn't quite hear what you said. Could you just clear that up?
Yeah, that's a donation from the Lincoln School PTO. They donated, they wanted to donate some smart boards, so we went and got prices, and the 4 smart boards came to be $13,889. So they usually, we get the quote from them, and they donate the money to us, and we deposit it in our accounts, and then we go out and purchase the smart boards.
I thought they were more like $10,000 each.
I think there's certain different ones. I guess you could probably say better that I guess some have projectors and some don't.
Okay.
That.
But the last question I have is on resolution item number, this is superintendent resolution number 11. Reappointment of the director of extended day.
Yes.
At a salary of $98,000. Could somebody clear that up for me? Could somebody tell me a little bit more about that position? Is it a full-time position? How long has that person been there? What was the salary last year? How many people report to them, et cetera?
It is a full-time position. As far as number of staff, I'm not 100% sure how many staff there is, but this is in all elementary schools, and then there's some in the middle school. The elementary schools is where the majority of the students are. We have more staff in those schools. I think the middle school just has some for after school, or before school, but after school, one of those. And the elementary schools have both the before school and after school for that. I think the number of staff depends on the enrollment that we have for each year. I'm not 100% sure what the enrollment is.
Okay, I'm familiar with the aftercare program at Radcliffe, and there's usually about 2 people there. So if there's 5 elementary schools, that would be, let's say, 10 or 12 people. You said there might be 1 or 2 at the middle school. So I'm assuming that it's a staff of roughly 12 to 15 people that work, maybe more.
Oh, yeah, much more. Depending upon the number of students at each school, the staff is built up. Some schools have more than others. And this also goes through it's not going to happen this year, the summer program too, that will be a few months during the summer they're going to have it this year, the last year, right?
12-month position.
12-month position, yeah. But there are more teachers at each school. There's more than 2 or 3 at each school. There's a lead teacher, and there must be at least 6, 7, 8, 10, as many of the students that have the aftercare in that particular school.
Yeah, let me clear something up. It's a full-time position, and it's driven by the tuition of that program. This does not come out of our budget. Okay, it's under the auspices of the Nutley Board of Education, but Extended Day pays for all its own expenses and pays a fee to the school to use our buildings. So it's definitely a revenue generator, and this $98,000 does not come out of our budget. And this particular individual has been in this position for at least 10 years. So even before the Board of Education took it over, when it was a town entity, she was the director there as well. So she's got a wealth of experience of over 10 years in the program.
Mr. DeVita, the salary for, I guess, the current year is $98,000. Do you know what it was last year?
Last year, I think it was $91,000.
And last question on that, is that person related to anybody that's employed in Board of Education?
I can speak to that. That is a sister-in-law. She was actually in this position before I became the superintendent. I have zero input into the conditions of her employment, her contract, and I am precluded by law from being involved in any way. Additionally, as you probably know, by law, as a superintendent, I cannot have any body that's related to me, either through blood or marriage, employed in this district from the time I became the superintendent. So this was a pre-existing employee and not mine. I just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Alan Thomas, 108 McKinley Street. Just a point of clarification. The corrective action plan, Appendix I, regarding the internal controls for record keeping in the extended day program, places responsibility for implementation on the extended day director and the extended day bookkeeper. But just a few moments ago, Mr. Vinci said Mr. DeVita's office is responsible for that. So I'm wondering who's really responsible.
Address that?
I think what I mentioned is that the business office was looking into possibly buying software for the invoicing or billing system. I'm not sure if it's going to be a responsibility of the business office, or it sounds like it's more the director of the extended day, but I think he was trying to assist them with evaluating software packages.
I noticed that that's, Mr. President, that's one of the recommendations in last year's audit report that was not completed. I was wondering why that wasn't completed in the past year.
This is not a duplicate recommendation, or has there been any change on it?
It's a repeat from the prior year, I think.
Again, that we.
I mean, in light of the fact the extended day program director received a $7,000 increase in salary, I would think that might have been something that might have come into the discussion.
Answer that?
I think we did look into buying certain software, there's certain accounting packages like Quicken, QuickBooks. We looked into getting that and having proper training to do that. So I think we did actually purchase some software, but I guess with the training, it sort of fell through the cracks with it from not actually implementing it. But by next year, or this current year that we're in, the software package will be implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Dr. Sutton.
Anyone else want to be heard on the resolution items only? Okay, so you know what was this portion of the meeting? Mr. Sposado, would you move Superintendent's resolutions 1 through 16, please?
Mr. President, I move for the resolutions 1 through 16 as written.
Second.
Have a second? Any discussion? I believe, let's record the roll, please.
Mr. Franco,
Yes on all, with the extension of my daughter's name on number 7 and extension on number 11 as pursuant to law.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Riley. Yes. Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Ms. Russo.
Yes, on all except number 10, I abstain with my sister-in-law, Carmela Conterviero.
Mr. Recorder.
Yes.
Mr. Pizzato.
Yes.
Dr. Casano.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Cook, would you move, all right, Board Secretary resolutions 1 through 19, please?
Yes, Mr. President. I move Business Administrator, Board Secretary resolutions 1 through 19.
I have a second.
Second.
Have any discussion on the resolutions listed?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'd just like to ask the board secretary on the adoption of policies. Which policies are new policies and existing policies? Were there any changes made in any of the existing policies by the drafts, SMA, or committee?
I believe that the first one, I believe that there were some changes in this one. I'm not sure what exactly the changes were. With the new accountability regulations, there was certain wording that was added for statutes, so that was amended to.
So were they recommended changes by
Yes.
your assessment?
Yes, the order of recommended. The Second one, for surrogate parents and foster parents, that was a new policy.
Is that a mandatory policy or is that an optional?
I think that was mandatory, because that was, there's certain language now that the law had changed for a guardian. So this reflects parents, foster parents, and also that. Teaching staff members. I'm not 100% sure on this one. I have to double check on this one. But Mr. Rogers, do you remember if this one was new?
This was, the teaching said no, this was just, what we're processing agency. It's not good.
Okay. That one, nothing new.
That was just updated by.
Yeah, it's updated, yeah. Harassment, discrimination, bullying one, that was, we already had our policy in place.
That was updated.
That was just updated. The next one is the regulation, for the harassment. All right. The next one, the crisis management policy, this is a new policy. It was worked on, Mr. Rogers had,
Mr. Riley, this new lockdown policy now conforms with the Attorney General guidelines, and that's where the changes have to be done. It isn't.
Is that a statewide policy? Is that?
yeah.
Yes,
So all districts,
Well, we did some modifying to the policy. I think when it came from the recommendation from Strauss Esme, it was just for a lockdown procedure, but
we tightened it up.
Yes.
Good.
And the last one, the pupil accident insurance, that we already had that policy in place. It was just to change some of the wording of the statute.
Any other questions or comments on the resolutions? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Francola.
Before I vote, I would like to thank personally Lincoln School PTO for their generous donation of $13,000 plus. I am their representative, and I know they worked very hard to raise this money, and as all the schools did. Thursday night, I was at the Tricky Tray for Spring Garden School, and it was an excellent turnout, and they raised a lot of money for our school, for our children. They should be commended, and I know many of the other schools will be sending in money also. As far as my vote, I vote yes on all, with the exception of check number 081566, resolution number 2. I abstain.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Riley.
I'd also like to echo the same thoughts as my colleague here, Mr. Nicola, with the Lincoln School PTO. I thank them very much for their very generous donation, and I vote yes.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes on all payments except for communications.
Mrs. Russo.
Yes.
Mr. Sauter.
Yes, except number 2, where my name is mentioned, for 223.
Mr. Esposito.
Yes.
Dr. Casal.
Yes, and I'd also like to commend the Lincoln School PTO and all our PTO organizations and towns. They're a very supportive group in town, and we should never take these donations for granted, especially in these difficult times. I vote yes. Mr. Sauter, would you read Board Secretary Resolution number 20, Memorial?
Yes. Memorial, Phyllis Gambia. Whereas with deep sorrow and regret, the Nutley Board of Education recorded the death of Phyllis Gambia on November 4th, 2009, where Mrs. Gambia had served the Nutley Board of Education as bus driver for 25 years prior to retirement in 2002. And whereas Ms. Gambia won the respect of all those with whom she came in contact for her dedication to the Nutley School District, now be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Township of Nutley extends deepest sympathy to the members of her family, and further be it resolved that this resolution be made part of the minutes of this meeting, and a copy be sent to the members of her family. So moved.
Second.
Second. Any other comment?
I have one. This is one of those unsung heroes in the district. You know, we have bus drivers and cafeteria workers, and we have people who are involved in our educational process that do a lot of work. Being a bus driver is not a very, very easy job. So, again, I just want to extend my appreciation to this individual here as well as the others who are keeping this team together. Thank you.
Mr. Franicola?
Yes.
Mr. Crispo?
Yes.
Mr. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Sorter?
Yes.
Mr. Sposato?
Yes.
Dr. Casale?
Yes. All right, at this time, I'd like to open up the floor to hearing of citizens on, where we allow questions and comments on all school-related matters, regulations, law, regulations, communications. Again, each person should be limited to 3 minutes. We ask you to try to stay within that, as I stated earlier. All questions and statements should be directed to me. If you have more than one question, please wait until everyone else has had opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Joan Levino, 48 North Road. I would like to know the status of since we've been in the newspaper rather regularly lately, Thursday on the front page of the Star Ledger, yesterday in the op-ed page, the status of the detention that has been proposed where parents have to pay.
Status of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have our attorney here tonight, he can speak that to in a minute, but let me just say something. The status of that is that was a research project. This was announced on October 12th that the committee would be examining. It was an invitation for the public to take part in the committee meeting to get input on this concept. Right now, the status is it's not even coming to the board. As it was first suggested that we look into paying for detention. The intention was to find a way to enhance that wonderful experience called detention. And we had full knowledge that anything we did decide could not apply across the board to all our students because there are special regulations for each and every student in the district. So, Mr. Pomaco, if you want to comment on that.
I'll comment on the legality of assessing a fine, which I was able to check on. And if you've read, at least the newspaper accounts I read, there is an indication in there that it was proposed and it was considered, and I was asked as legal counsel to determine the legality of assessing a fine. My determination has been that you cannot do it, and I have advised the board accordingly. So they are not going to adopt a policy that has a fine component. They've asked me to look at some other alternatives, one of them being community service. I'm currently checking that. No determination has been made at all. Contrary to the way it's been portrayed by the media, this board did not as a body decide to proceed. I was asked by board member Rogers. He had an idea. He asked me to check legality, and this idea of charging a fee, it's not legal in my estimation and will not be undertaken by this board.
Thank you. Also, I would like to know how the generous increase in the teacher salaries, how we're going to pay for that in this town.
I believe it's been budgeted for. It's within our budget.
It is within the budget. There's no increase in taxes with this new increase in salaries.
Well, Mr. DeVita can speak more specifically to your question, but let me just share with you. If we have a 4% cap that we're allowed to increase our budget by, you can guarantee that as it relates to the school taxes, the school assessment, that 4% is going to be utilized each and every year. To do otherwise is extremely irresponsible.
Why?
Because I've sat on this board when we have had 0 increases, 0.25% increases, and all that does is preclude you from expanding your cap the following year. It has consequences that preclude you from spending any money in any other area beyond the cap, and it shrinks your cap. So it actually hurts us to not meet that cap requirement. We've done it in the past. And I think to save each household $25, or whatever the case may be, on average, we'd have to crunch the numbers, because we can say, well, we spend 3% instead of 4%. We're grossly being irresponsible, because it's going to show up in the classroom, it's going to show up in how we deliver our product. Like, I know you can't compare what goes on in the classroom to a business. You compare you guys to a business, yes. You can't compare what goes on in the classroom to a business, because if we shortchange ourselves there, we can't decide to put out less of a product or an inferior product or try to save money. So we will take advantage of that cap. I believe it's responsible to take advantage of that cap each and every year, because in education it's very simple. Growth requires spending. I think where we need to focus all of our attention is how the state funds education moving forward. One of the biggest scams, in my opinion, is the lottery system, which is supposed to be supposed to be funding education and senior citizen services. If they were to assess that program, and they were to not make it, a self-promoting, job-creating situation, which is what it is, you can take some of the burden, most of the burden, off the backs of the taxpayers for education. Unfortunately, the way it stands now, it is on the backs of the taxpayers. It's not fair, but it's what's so. And we can't afford to not take advantage of that cap every year if we want to continue to improve and put out a new product.
It's a very interesting way to put it. I have one other question. I had called the board office about the professional dues for administrators. Now that, am I correct in assuming that has been discontinued, that the administrators and department heads no longer have professional dues paid for by the Board of Education?
I believe that's in the contract.
It's in the contract still?
Yes.
The last time I spoke about this several years ago, it was about $25,000. Now, if you people want to cut anything, I think you could cut those. That's a perk, a tremendous perk. And people who receive it are all making about $100,000 a year or more. They can certainly afford to pay for their own dues. And I think that this board should address that. In fact, Mr. Casal, I thought you had told me that that was addressed several years ago.
I thought it was removed several years ago, because I remember when you brought that up to us.
That's
a contractual item. What could happen is, depending on contract to contract, it may come in, it may come out, but we'll be more mindful of something like that moving forward. Because we have to start thinking outside the box. We have to start looking at areas where we're spending money, and that's a perfect example, where we have to just not spend money in that area.
Right, because you're nickel and diming people, and $25,000 is a substantial amount.
Absolutely.
And this is about the third time in the 30 years that I've been attending board meetings, well, I haven't recently, that I brought this topic up, and nothing has ever been done about it, which I think is really irresponsible on your part. It seems the game is always the same. The players keep changing.
Dr. Casal, since the topic of detention was brought up, and I was involved, I'd like to read a statement from that. Great. In light of the uninformed controversy racing through the media pertaining to the paper detention proposal, I feel it compelled to clarify the situation. Firstly, it was never suggested that fines be issued to parents of students who occasionally receive detention. The plan was to penalize those who habitually are sent to detention. The question is, of course, why would I support such a plan? Having been a teacher in the public school system for 40 years, I thoroughly understand that even the best teacher cannot effectively teach the class if there's continual disruption. The result is the remainder of the class is cheated out of the day's lesson. This is certainly inappropriate. In Nutley, I believe we have very few disruptive students, but it only takes a few, and we should do everything in our power to dissuade that kind of behavior. The assignment of detention to chronically disruptive students seems to do little to solve the problem. If it did, the school would not have to be repeated assigning detention. My intent in supporting the pay for detention was an attempt to get parents' attention in helping quell their child's poor behavior. And unfortunately, in America today, nothing gets attention like money. When the proposal was initially made, I knew that most likely it would be illegal. I felt the proposal would draw attention, however, to the problem, and it certainly did. I hope my objective has been met as a result. I constantly hear from adults, when I was in school, I got in trouble, and I was in much more trouble when I got home. I think we need this kind of mentality for all parents if the schools are to be allowed to do their job effectively. However, I wonder if it exists today for students who are habitually disruptive and regularly sent to detention. For many, I'm sure it's true, but for many, I'm sure it's untrue. My attempt was to get all parents on board with this issue, especially those having children with behavioral problems. My attempt was never to punish people. Let me conclude by saying I will make no more comment on this subject. I refused media comment today. I hope I've made my point throughout this discussion, and I hope positive results will follow. Thank you.
Okay, Terry Clark, 45 Hampton Place, President and spokesperson of the Nutley Parent Advocacy Network. This is America. That's all I have to say. I'm going to have to agree to disagree with some of Mr. Sauter's statements, but that's not why I'm here. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Polanco for advocating for his board in such a way that he gave the right legal advice. I don't like to be adversarial, so contrary to popular belief. Okay. However, with things that are being said in this whole venue here, with this whole situation, I think what has happened is that there's been a lot of hard feelings on, obviously, this side, and we have hard feelings on the other. And that is something that we shouldn't be having. You know, we are a community, we are here together, and we should come together because we're here for the kids. So, I'm like I said, I'm glad that you came to that decision, but it doesn't take away how other people are feeling. Mr. Soder feels his way, and he's entitled to that. That's his opinion. I do have a parent here tonight, and she has a statement that she would like to read, just like Mr. Soder read his. Thank you.
Susan Zaccaro, 342 Winthrop Drive. I have a statement I'm going to read because I'm a little uncomfortable speaking to my students about science. And I'm directing this to you, Steve. I know you have been hearing from many people in response to your proposal to charge parents for student detentions now that it has been publicized in the news and on TV. I have listened to you speak at the board meeting on the topic, watched the TV reports, read the articles, and spent a good deal of time looking over online comments from residents in town. I would like to address one thing upon which none of the reports and opinions I came across have focused. Let me preface my opinion by saying that I believe your intentions to look for a creative way to save the district money are honorable. The climate of our economy necessitates all of us to rethink the way we spend our money, and I applaud you and the Board of Education for any attempt you make to do so. With that said, what has bothered me the most is your quote that appeared in the Star Ledger article dated November 19th. And it read, "It may not seem like a lot of money, but it adds up over time." Rogers said, "Parents need to step up to the plate and to be held responsible and accountable for their children's habitual actions." I'm extremely disturbed by that quote. I'm shocked that the same man who was so compassionate about the situation my daughter and I were facing last year and so willing to work with us as a team to solve the problem could say such a thing. When I read those words, they said to me, if your daughter repeatedly gets in trouble and is assigned detention, you're a bad parent and not doing your job. And we, the board, are going to punish you. It was cut and dry with no consideration of circumstances or individual situations. I was left wondering where that spirit of compassion, cooperation, and teamwork had gone. Once the feeling of hurt had subsided, I began to think, I've been a classroom teacher for over 20 years and have spent countless hours trying to develop effective methods of behavior modification for my students. I, like many teachers, have attended staff development workshops on classroom management. I have communicated with guidance counselors, co-workers, and administrators to discuss the behavior of certain children and find ways to transform those behaviors. I have called and emailed parents to advise them of inappropriate behaviors on the part of their children and to work cooperatively with them to develop plans to effect change. Sometimes the techniques have been successful and sometimes they haven't. But regardless of the success, one thing that has always remained constant: the parents have always been an integral part of the team that works together to best meet the needs of a child. I have never and would never set up a situation in which I put a wall between the parents and the school and marked off sides. And that is exactly what I believe your proposal and subsequent vote have done. Would it be acceptable for my district to bill parents for the days spent training me on classroom discipline? Would it be acceptable for me to bill parents for the prep periods I've spent meeting with other staff to discuss student behaviors? For the hours I've spent making phone calls and sending emails to them? For the time I've spent talking to my own parents to find out what methods they successfully used when they were teachers? Of course it wouldn't. To quote an old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And in light of Dr. Casal's statement that you're not going forward with this proposal, I would just ask you to please consider what I've said as you investigate those other alternatives to student detention so you don't alienate the parents in this town from the village.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my opinion.
Thank you.
Your statement is well taken, and you don't want to make light of it at all. But I need to point out that this was never designed as a means to address every single student. And I think that by Mr. Rogers announcing it and inviting the community, we had a member of MPAN at a policy meeting, to come to the meeting and give us your input. I think that's absolutely not an us and them and a line in the sand. It was an open invitation to come in and perhaps share with us things that we need to have shared with us. Once the media gets involved, then all bets are off. I know that you quoted what he said, but I know he said much more that just wasn't sexy enough to put into the article. It wouldn't sell newspapers. I know that when we were interviewed, when we heard that Channel 7 and Channel 2, and we have these news trucks, we felt it was a little risky not to go speak to them so that they could put any spin they want on the story. And even though we might have stood there speaking with them for like 15 minutes and they got to put a 5-minute blurb on the TV, which is going to attract attention, I was very happy that at the very least they put down that what we were doing was collecting research and no action was going to take. I think that was lost in the frenzy. I understand it's a sensitive area. Nobody's disputing that. I apologize for any anxiety it might have caused parents or students who felt they would have been placed in harm's way if this had gone forward. But the key is communication. And we need to do a better part. But when we have an invitation, this is how this all started, with the invitation to come and be part of the policy process and share ideas with us. I think to continue more of that in that line is the best way to move forward, so these things do not take on a life of their own and create a lot of anxiety and misinformation out there. So thank you for your statement. I know it must not have been the easiest thing to do, and that we all appreciate it. Anyone else wish to be heard?
Jerry Parisi, 35 Old Crest Place in Nutley. Earlier, you made references to some policies, and you mentioned Strauss-Esme. I was glad to hear that. For those of you in the audience that don't know, and maybe some of you on the board, Strauss-Esme is a group of professionals, I would call them consultants. Their job when they're hired, including through Nutley, is to keep you informed of changes at the state law level, federal law level, and Department of Education as it comes down to mandated policies or suggestions or even modifying current existing policies. 4 or 5 years ago, I chaired the policy committee, and we had that same idea. And I don't blame you, Steve, for not knowing it was discussed because you weren't on the board 4 or 5 years ago. So we discussed the idea of detention, and especially for habitual offenders, and perhaps a fine in regards of maybe not so much for the money, but to really hit home about how the offenders were disrupting classrooms. And Mr. Sawyer, I agree 100% with your statement regarding that. What we did is I asked our administrator to contact Strauss-Esme before we went public with the thought. We didn't have all the hullabaloo, we didn't have newspaper articles, we didn't have news shows. We simply were told a few days later through our administrator, Strauss-Esme agreed that would be not legal, it wouldn't be able to work. He cited a number of references to us, the administrator, Dr. Vivinetto, and it was included in a report to the board under the policy committee report. I think, as Dr. Casale just said, the biggest issue was perhaps the idea was right to expand on it and to even promote it, but it took on a life of its own because before you even find out if it was doable, it was already being presented as something to work on. I think if you had looked into it first and found out you couldn't do it, none of these issues would have arisen, and if by chance it could have been done, that would have been a time to promote it publicly. So please consider that next time. Thank you.
I must also point out, the fee for detention, or whatever, was not the only issue with this. There were several other issues that the policy committee was going through. So it wasn't just that. It wasn't driven by that single issue. The points were taken. Thank you.
Dr. Casale?
Yes.
Make a comment?
Sure.
I think that there's lessons learned here. I mean, what happened, and we can't do anything about it, and it's history. But, I'm all in favor of new ideas, and actually I'm in favor of the public being brought in early into the process. But I think that it's, there's a process that has to be followed, and the first step is a feasibility. Is it lawful? Is it economically feasible? Is it administratively doable? And all parties involved in that process also have, whether they are board members or public helping out board members, have an obligation to be careful what they say, what's divulged. And you can't go public too soon. As Dr. Parisi said, we got to, there's a point in time where, yes, now we can expand the number of people. But I think there's a lesson learned here. Because, the publicity that the township got I don't think was good. And again, it's history, but I think that going forward, lessons learned, we have to look at that process and be careful with, make sure that we things are properly.
Yes, well, I said I wouldn't comment anymore, but I have to make comment. I lied. Neither Steve nor I ever called the press. They called. So who divulged this? Who made it public? I don't know. But I know full well that I never called anyone, and he never called me. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Russo.
I'm sorry, I have to add my 2 cents on this. The lesson I learned is that transparency is good, but only up to a point. When we start to hear backlash about ideas, we're thinking outside the box. This is something that I ran my campaign on, and Mr. Rogers did it as well. It's good, but only up to a point. If we start stepping on somebody's toes, then it's time to shut our mouths. I have to disagree with that. I think transparency is the way to go. We have good ideas, we have not so good ideas. We requested the public's input. We didn't even take this particular issue beyond the policy committee. We hadn't brought it to the full board yet. So I'm curious how the public feels. They want us to come to them, or they want us to keep it behind closed doors until it's ready to go to the full board?
I did not suggest that the public not be involved.
I don't think she was accusing me of that.
Well, no, but the public knowledge of it, again, it's how big is the circle going to be where the knowledge is out there at a particular point in time, and until the idea is vetted somewhat, I think you want to be careful what that circle is, because look what happens. the press runs with, they'll run with it, and they never, you know, well, not, they never, but
They never,
the press, you have to, you know, you take it with a grain of salt, but the public doesn't know that, but they take it for gospel sometimes, what's in that, in the press release, and so you gotta be careful. That's all I'm saying.
Any other comments on that issue? Mr. Thomas? And it looks like 20 minutes is up, just kidding.
I don't want to talk about detention laws.
Thank you.
Mr. President, in case you haven't noticed, I'm sure you have, that the state is evaluating its finances with our new governor-elect. And one of the things that's been leaking out of Trenton and out of this transition committee these days is that the current fiscal situation is far worse than originally thought. And one of the ideas that is being passed around, as are many ideas, is dramatic cuts in current fiscal year expenditures. And as you know, a big chunk of our expenditures as a Board of Education come from the state. And I'm wondering if the board has directed the superintendent or the business administrator to prepare contingency plans for cutting current year spending.
Well, at our latest finance committee, if you want.
I'll answer that, because it's, the finance committee, when we met, one of the things that we asked superintendent and businessman is that very thing. Not only for this year, contingency, if we lose state aid, and also for next year, various scenarios. We want to be prepared for, so we are thinking along those lines.
Mr. President, would we be privy to what the request to the superintendent and BA was? I mean, how was it to be formatted? Were specific numbers given, or just, in other words, you said prepare for a $100,000 cut, $1 million cut, $2 million cut?
We'll have hard numbers at our next budget meeting, but
Basically, we're talking about percentage, 1% cut, 2%, 3% below, dropping. That's basically how we're
And your expectation when you receive that report is?
Well, we're going to be meeting again on December 3rd, and my expectation is we have something that at least in that direction, and then so we can firm it up by sometime in January with the holidays.
Last year, we froze what we believed was discretionary spending about January. About January, where we were reviewing all requests for additional spending, field trip, professional days, anything. We've started that already.
In that context, Mr. President, I remember very clearly our budget meeting last year, where items were listed for being cut in the current budget. Particularly an area that got a lot of attention was athletics and student activities. My knowledge is limited as to what actually goes on a day-to-day basis in the school, since I'm not in school anymore. So I don't know what was actually cut. I hear from some parents that a lot of the clubs have closed down. I'm wondering if a lot of the athletic teams have been shut down. But more specifically, I'm wondering if the board has received a report on exactly what was cut.
with regard to athletics, we give them a number. We don't tell them we want you to cut X, Y, and Z. And I think, what was that for athletics?
About $600,000.
About $600,000. That includes the extracurricular, so it wasn't just athletics.
I understand.
And then they break it down because we don't do the day-to-day either, right? Or we should. So we could probably get a report on where those cuts were made and make that public. But I don't think anybody's seen it as Mr. Zarrell's idea.
I actually completed a report for my own knowledge, particularly with Michael's departure coming soon, on what exactly was cut with the budget, what positions were brought back. Most of those positions were required through special education, and we received extraordinary aid to support those positions. And that report is probably about a half hour to an hour away from being completed. That's how much more time I need. But the ballpark figure for extracurricular activities, athletics, extracurricular clubs was was somewhere in the area of, I believe, originally $600,000. And that in fact, what we do with our budget is, the budget is built from the ground up. The teachers make requests to the department chair or in the elementary schools to the principals. They build their school-wide budget. They bring it up to the business administrator and myself to review. And of course, they have a number, and we've reduced that by dollar amounts from 2 years ago to last year, from last year to this year. So we have tried to keep that down. And then we try to make it all fit. And many times we prioritize, or we ask principals to see what they absolutely need, what they can do without, or if they order 20 of something, can they live with 10? So it's an ongoing process, but it actually starts at the building level. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Michael, regarding, we give them a number, and we ask them to work within that number.
Actually, I stand for, I apologize, I flipped the two numbers. We were spending about 9, we cut 3, and we're left with 6. So I had them backwards. Okay. So it's 300,000 we cut.
I'm going to show you we cut 300,000 from that budget.
But again, from the board's perspective, when we're finance committee's meeting, I don't think we want to micromanage how that, which footballs, don't buy 3 footballs or something like that. That might be at a, micromanaging. I don't think is going to get us anywhere. It's we got to tell the athletic director, here's what you got to do.
Mr. President, I would never suggest that the Board of Education micromanage. I would just suggest that the Board of Education get reports, get information, so that they can distribute that information to parents who are concerned about their children not having clubs and organizations anymore. All I know is what we were told last spring is that teams were going to be cut and clubs were going to be cut. So far, all I've heard are clubs have been cut. And I'm asking you, here it is, the end of November, okay? Does the board know what was cut out of that $300,000 or so from athletics and
That's a
extracurriculars?
report we can get. We'll have that at the next meeting, because I'd be curious myself. So I know that with some of the sports, like hockey, for example, I know that it was suggested that we were going to eliminate the hockey program. And if you think that paying for detention caused the, anyway.
Because I know I saw the thread about that.
Well, so what the athletic director has been doing, years ago, we had no hockey, we had no lacrosse, so the parents funded the entire program. It got to a point where we could put it into our budget. Well, now we're at a point where he's going over, parents need to contribute a little bit more, and the board needs to contribute a little bit less. And last time I spoke with Mr. Pyro at a football game, he was telling me, what some of his ideas were. That's the direction he was going in, getting more of the booster clubs to contribute. But we can get a hard report, and we can probably have that at the next meeting, probably before he leaves, so he's not getting off the hook, not giving us a report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, my concern is, again, what we were told last spring, and then what has filtered down to many parents' surprises. In September they arrived in school to find out their kids are not going to have clubs and organizations. There was a disconnect between what we said during the budget discussions and then what happened in September.
What happened with the clubs? As part of the negotiations, there was a sidebar agreement about clubs. And that needed to be worked out once the school year started. That's why there was a delay there. And I'm sure the number of clubs in some of the schools have been reduced, but the contractual clubs, such as student council, things of that nature, continue to be supported by the budget. The other ones, the teachers graciously agreed to take compensation day instead of a $500 stipend. So there was some real progress, and we saved a lot of clubs. And with the middle school, there are different staff members now stepping in and deciding who's going to cover some of those music clubs so that they are covered. It took a lot longer than any one of us would have liked, but at least we got there. And now that we know we have to think, forget about outside the box, we have to be off the table with the budget for next year. We'll make sure that we hit the ground running in September.
And that's why I raised it, Mr. President. It's going to be even worse this year.
I understand that.
Than next year.
He's talking about he wants to shrink the cap. But the only thing I heard that was hopeful, and let's hope he keeps his promise, he's talking about reducing some of the unfunded mandates from the state as well. So we'll have more, even though we'll have a smaller cap, we'll have a little bit more discretion on how we can spend our money.
Good luck with that.
Am I correct in assuming, did we cut some coaches?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Matter of fact,
Well, we'll get it over,
normally
yeah.
in football, don't we cut about 3 of them?
We cut several.
We cut a number of coaches, we'll get the report so that we, you know, we know what we're talking about in black and white rather than just guess. Because I know no one here would ever do it if we give you the wrong information. I don't want to see them stall in front of the school again.
Please not for that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mike Griswold, 11 Main Street. Just to follow up on what Mr. Thomas just said, we had talked before, or there was a CPA that got up before the microphone a few weeks ago and asked for a full report of the financial situation that the board is in, or the district is in. Given the fact that the finance committee is going to be meeting on December 3rd, and Mr. DeVita is leaving on the 18th, would it be possible to have a formal presentation, maybe a PowerPoint presentation, you know, just a 15, 20 minutes state of the.
We could probably give you an update with the audit report, probably most of that up through July 1st, so we could probably give you updates as a result of our committee meeting. But what the other PowerPoint, I think you wanted to use, there was a request to understand what the contract was all about. So that's a PowerPoint presentation that we're working on now. There's more information in there than just, you know, there's a settlement number, nobody wants to look at anything else. So, no, we're working on that, we'll have it real soon.
I just wanted to follow up on the comment, Lieutenant Rogers, that you were quoted before. I personally, as a father of 4 children in this school district, I have no problem with you mentioning parent accountability. I have no problem whatsoever, and I applaud you for saying that. As far as the interim BA,
Yes.
are you optimistic that we're going to have somebody in place before Mr. DeVita
We had 3
leaves?
interviews before this meeting.
Okay.
Yes. And after this meeting, we're going back downstairs to discuss everybody's thoughts on the individuals that we interviewed.
And it's just purely for an interim position, correct?
Absolutely.
Interim, yes.
Okay. And the last question.
And they all said that they are ready to start immediately.
Can you just give us a quick update on the website situation?
Yes, the website situation,
Yes, it is.
that's something very interesting. We had Ian put together a proposal to do it in-house as compared to what we all saw the other month here, compared to what we saw in the auditorium at the beginning of the summer as a result of the volunteers committee, and comparing that to the RFPs we got in. So he gave us a proposal for this evening, which we're going to look at, and we're going to get to that as soon as possible. But you need to understand, the budgetary restrictions on this are not putting it on the front burner right now, but we're going to get to it as soon as we can. He believes that, and I don't speak for you, but just to keep it simple, we can do in-house everything that they showed us here. Plus the presentation that we saw in the auditorium at the beginning of the summer, most of that he helped them build anyway. So I don't know if how many people saw that the volunteer committee, well, if you did, it's a wonderful website as well. And what we're trying to do in the meantime is get as much information on the existing website as possible. So that's moving forward. But again, that's driven by the budget. So.
One last question, sorry.
Promise?
I swear. All the supporting documentation that went along with the agenda, I know the agenda got put up on the website yesterday. Can we, in the future, possibly get the supporting documentation?
My sentiment is always, you need to get everything up there by Thursday, Friday, when I'm told, because I can only talk to the superintendent, if I can't pull staff members and say, I really don't bang my fist anyway, I do my fingers anyway, I can't call up and say I want this up here. As the documents get prepared, they get put up here. So, you know, we're working real hard to it. And you gotta admit, you know, compared to a while ago, big improvement. Anyone else? Okay, close this portion of the meeting, but I would like to say something about the BA search. We interviewed 3 people today. We're going to go down into the closed session and move forward with getting an interim. But I have been associated with a number of searches on my tenure here on the Board of Education. We've gone through 2 superintendent searches. I think we've had 4 BAs. However, we've never gone through a search, or I've never gone through a search being in a leadership position. So it is my intention and I mentioned this at the last meeting, we're going to move forward with an interim, and it would be whoever Mr. Zara recommends, based on what we're going to discuss tonight. But I want to formulate a steering committee made up of members of the public with members of the Board of Education, but members of the Board of Education not being a majority by any stretch, to put together a global search for a permanent business administrator. I don't want to feel as though we're under the gun to come up with somebody. That's why this decision to hire an interim is a very difficult choice. Not so much difficult, but it's a very interesting choice because we're looking for someone that can stay here as long as it takes for us to find a permanent VA. We're not putting a 6-month, 6-week, 2-month limit on this. It takes us a year, it takes us a year. But my intention is to put this committee together so we could use the sources of people who have contacts and know how to search for people that are talented, outside the box, to bring to the board for our consideration. And then ultimately, the superintendent makes the recommendation. But we have to stop pulling from such a small pool. For example, we had a number of applications for the interim. An application came in late through members, through our auditor who had a recommendation or let somebody know that Nutley's looking for an interim BA. Another person let Nutley know they're looking for an interim BA. So we had a number of more applications that we're just not going to get by putting an ad in the Star Ledger. So right now what I'm working on, it's a wonderful input from Alan Thomas. We need to, what I would like people to do is forward a letter of interest to the business office that you would like to be on this committee. And we will decide as we go along how many members and who's going to be on it and how long, how often you're going to meet and report to the board. We're going to also look into if there's some kind of a budget available for it to make sure we can reach out globally to find the best candidate for the job. If there will be any administrative or clerical assistance from our office so that it works. You just don't want to get in the room, kumbaya, let's try to find somebody. We want this to be effective, we want this to work, we want to make sure we end up with the best permanent solution that we can. So if you're not interested in serving, find other people that may be interested in serving and have them forward the letter of interest to the board office so we can move forward with that. Anyone have anything else on the
Yes, several weeks ago, I was looking through the Nutley Sun, a quick look, of course, because there wasn't too much to look at, but they listed several people that had done quite well for themselves and graduated from Nutley High. And then subsequent to that, I happened to walk to the kitchen and CNBC was on, and they had a story about the endowments at Yale and Harvard, et cetera. And I said to myself, why can't we get some of that money? Why can't we possibly set up an endowment for our school? And then during the football game, I had the opportunity to speak with one of my ex-students who's done quite well for himself. And we began to talk about this. And he told me that he had contact with a lot of people that had given money to big-name schools. And most of the reason they gave the money is because they wanted their name on the building or on a door. And I said to myself, we have a lot of doors. We have a lot of buildings. Would it be reasonable to develop a committee that would look into the fact that we might be able to come up with some sort of endowment plan? We have a lot of people that have graduated, done very well for themselves. We have a lot of people that have taught the system that would be willing to chip in, obviously not enough to buy a door, but still chip in significantly. I would certainly be willing to chip in some money. Maybe we could get this thing started.
That's a good idea. I mean, we could do that through a volunteers committee as well, because that's basically how, the courtyard was refurbished.
So we could expand this.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Yale and Harvard have billions. Why can't we get some?
We'll definitely move forward with that. It's a great idea.
When do you think we could investigate this?
As soon as, you have
At the next meeting, could we set up a committee?
Yeah. Yeah. We do that almost instantly, start committee.
I think we have a very detailed alumni list.
I think that would be a good start.
That's a good start.
Yeah.
May I say one more thing and then I'll be finished? Bob Resignola, who is a past board member and is here at every meeting, had an operation last week, and I'm sorry to see that he's not here tonight, and I certainly want to wish him well and a speedy recovery, and I'm sure everyone else on the board wishes him the same.
Where are we at now? Old business, new business?
Monkey business.
Monkey business, no. Old business.
Old business, okay. I got one for that. I want to know where our status is on our grant writer. Where is that? I know we had something up.
I think we got 2 proposals, Michael.
We're going with it?
I know we were still trying to look into certain legalities. That went well. Some of the
My suggestion is you schedule, there's only 2 who applied, my suggestion is you schedule them in for, we went out on RFPs, schedule them in for review. And the legal question, I think, can be resolved easily when we have that interview. I think that that's the issue. The issue revolved around flat fee versus a percentage fee. There's certain questions we need answers to from the proposed applicant for the position before we really can handle that. So my suggestion to the board is schedule, you've got 2 people submit a proposal, schedule an appointment, and see what you want to do.
You see we get that rolling?
We will probably, depending on what we do this evening when we leave here, I would imagine we may have a special meeting Monday to take action if the desire feels it's appropriate on the BA. We could also have it to use that night. I mean, we can schedule it for next Monday. We'll talk about that since we get this closed session. Anybody else on for old business? Yes.
Old business, can we have the superintendent address the Chartwell grand reopening of the high school cafeteria?
Yes. As you know that we have really attempted in the last several years to find the right company to run our food service organization. And I believe that we've hit upon the ideal company in Chartwell. Some of you may have been here for their presentation. They did some, as promised, they did some renovations at the high school for the cafeteria, doing away with the facade, 1950s vintage, and the new serving line, some new lighting, which has made it very attractive. And I'm not sure what day it was, I don't have my calendar with me, but they had a grand opening, a open house, and also free lunch for every student in the high school. Some students were walking through the line with the tray bending in the middle, but they certainly were doing well. I was there, Mr. Franicola, Mrs. Russo, and it was very well attended. They were very enthusiastic. The selection of food was very good. If anybody's gone through a college cafeteria, it was very similar to that. And I think the most important thing, not only the appearance, not only the quality of the food, but also the enthusiasm and how pleasant the staff were in helping the kids, the students. And their hope was that if students, particularly at the high school with an open lunch, would get a taste of eating in, that they would continue. The next day, I understand that the numbers were somewhat more improved, although many high school students, I've spent several decades there, do enjoy going out to lunch, and the high school principal made a suggestion that they have takeout, that they develop a box type of lunch, and they certainly think that's something they can do very easily, where students can just grab it and go. So this is an awful lot, perhaps Mr. Franicola or Mrs. Russo want to add, but it was a very nice event.
Yes, what they did promise, they came across, and John was there that day, and I was very happy to see that he was so enthusiastic. It is a great look. If you have the opportunity to get to the high school to see it, I was impressed with the serving of all the yogurts and the juices in that one particular area. I said, this is wonderful, this is what they need. And basically, it's a hit, it's a big hit.
I'm glad you touched on Mr. Catronville's suggestion of the to-go lunch. That's something they did discuss here when they came here for their proposal, and the grammar school bag lunch type of thing. I'm wondering if they've started that in the grammar schools yet.
I will certainly check tomorrow. I must write it down, but I will check tomorrow. But I think overall, we're pleased. I think the students are, the staff is, and I think they're doing a very good job. And I'm not sure what the finances are, but I think we've reduced that loss greatly. And it's a question of getting students to eat in, and I think that's encouraging. The new situation, the new setup certainly is encouraging for them. Thank you.
Any old business? New business?
The new business, I got two questions, I guess, Mr. DeVito. Can you tell me what contracts we have coming up for this year or next year that we will be dealing with? As far as, I know we did teachers, can you tell me who?
Oh, we have the custodians, the maintenance and the grounds. That is, this is the last year of that contract. And then the year after that is, I believe the administrators, the cafeterias and transportation. And the district-wide employees.
District-wide employees this year, next year?
This year.
Current year.
Current year. So we are moving on that?
Yeah, we're gonna meet with the negotiations committee, discuss that.
Anyone else on the new business? New business. A motion to adjourn?
Motion to go to close.
Second.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. By vote 5-4, the board wishes you happy